and welcome to 99 Yards, American football for UK fans. My name is Liz and I'm joined once again by Gareth Duxbury, Jonathan Payton and Duncan Terry, and in this episode we'll be chatting game predictions for week 3, where it's going wrong for the offensive line in many teams, and also the re-election in the NFL Players Union. But before we get into all that, how is everyone?
Yeah, good. Week 2 done, still know nothing. Looking forward to week 3.
Yeah, not too bad. Probably not as good as someone holidaying in Mexico, commuting to Croydon and back every day. Isn't quite the same, but
No.
yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, surviving up in Scotland as well. The days are drawing in much faster now for you guys, but we'll be okay.
For those who follow me on Twitter, you'll know that I'm on holiday at the moment, and one of my favourite things, besides being all-inclusive, eating lots of food and whatnot, is being in the right time zone to catch all of the NFL action. To actually be able to watch Monday Night Football at a normal time is awesome. And what a great game Lions vs Giants was. Well, minus the last quarter anyway. Did any of you manage to watch it or catch up on the highlights?
Yeah, saw all of the game on catch up, as Game Pass allowed me to watch it this week. Got to love the Detroit Lions' new threads. Quite like their away jersey and their blue pants.
Yeah.
It's a good look. It does look a good look. Almost looks a bit retro. I also quite like watching an inept offense in a weird way, because the NFL's so obsessed with making trying to make it as easy as possible to score, and giving quarterbacks as much protection and with receivers as much protection. They want fantasy stats and etc. So every time you sort of see especially a prime time offense, just really struggle, especially when there's big names on that offense, like a Manning and a Beckham. I sort of take some bizarre delight in watching it, so I quite enjoyed it.
I didn't catch it actually, not this week. But from what I hear, Detroit Lions have got their running back and Ziggy Ansah back, so prospects looking good in New York. Sorry, Detroit.
Yeah, I was impressed with the Lions, and I know the Giants are anemic on offense. I'm with you, Johnny. Like, there's something soul destroying about watching a running back just get absolutely destroyed behind a line that can't do anything, and you feel for that. That rotation. Darkwa and Perkins behind there. Eli has not been great, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that Detroit were super effective on offense. Stafford threw for 122 yards, and they never looked in danger. They got the running game going. They had good blocking up front. The receivers did some nice things, and special teams, contributed. That's what you want. I was a bit sceptical of Detroit coming in, and I know it's only September and we don't make predictions, but they look good. I'd be worried if I was the Giants, because that D is good, but it looks like without Beckham, or even with Beckham in a limited role, that offense isn't going to do anything unless he's at full fitness. And even then, it's unsure. So I thought it was a good game. It's nice to have a decent Monday night game. Nice to have a decent primetime game where there's an NFC East team in it, because they all are at the minute, and we're not such a great division. But no, good for the Lions. And I'm with you, Jono. The uniforms are tip-top. Really like them.
And I thought Jared Davis as well, that rookie linebacker, until he got injured. Was that? I think Liz tweeted at 5 a.m. or something about what a cheap shot by Beckham it was.
Didn't even get started.
He played really well up to then before he was taken off. It really was he was everywhere, really plugging up the holes.
He's like a child, though,
and really good in coverage.
Yeah, I just think he acts like a child when things don't go his way, and that just drives him crazy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right, well, let's kick off the podcast with the week of games ahead. Thursday night is the LA Rams at Levi Stadium, the home of San Francisco 49ers. Initial thoughts on how you think that's going to go?
Well, as we've seen so far this season, both got quite strong defences. Might be a surprise to some, but both teams looking good on D. So I guess it all hinges on which offence turns up. You may remember last week I mentioned that Jared Goff was playing a lot better, and that Todd Gurley, having been one of my favourite players in college, is starting to look like his old self. So, potentially it could be the Rams, but really, both defences play well, could be anyone's game.
Yeah, I slightly tipped the 49ers at the start of the season that they could get a sneaky 8 wins, 9 wins, but I thought Shanahan might be able to do some magic things with that limited offensive roster, but I'm feeling less positive now. And a real shame that Reuben Foster got injured in the first game as well. So I feel like the Rams, who've had quite a nice start to the season in terms of schedule, I think the Rams are going to probably take this again, probably behind the running of Gurley, and then Goff can take advantage of the 49ers. Will probably end up stacking the box. So I'd probably go Rams with this.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement. I mean, the Rams D is superior. Aaron Donald, another week of fitness. He's going to be a game wrecker against a line that has proven itself not to be that great so far. I mean, San Francisco at the moment are essentially the front three, front four, and that's it. They've lost Reed in the backfield. Brian Hoyer is the worst version of Brian Hoyer at the moment. Shanahan can't seem to get spark going. I mean, Brian Hoyer is beneath the Gabbert zone. He's like, 3.7, 4.2 yards an attempt, something ridiculous like that. And, Jared Goff has improved. Todd Gurley's getting his spark back. Cooper Kupp looks like a really good find in the third round. And I just think, on balance, it's going to be a pretty poor game for both teams off a short week. But the Rams would probably have the better coaching on both sides of the ball and just the edge on talent, I think. But it is also, I don't know how people feel about this, but I kind of like the colour rush. So especially the Niners, the Niners all black, I think is a nice, that's when you've got a nice away kit sort of thing. It's a good different look. You wouldn't want to change it all the time, but that's one nice aspect of.
Are they wearing the black tomorrow?
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry. So
Yes, it is.
Are they? Because don't people complain that you can't read the numbers? I thought that's what Phil Simms was moaning about last year. That it could be the red numbers on the black jerseys.
That's true, actually. Yeah, I actually quite like it, but then again, I don't need to read the numbers for my job, so.
It's black versus yellow, isn't it? That's going to be a Twitter full of people saying it looks like there are bumblebees running around.
You imagine this Rams defense, and it's only going to get better as well. With Wade Phillips coaching it and Aaron Donald getting more and more match fit, game fit. I think, by the midpoint, by the time they visit Twickenham, I think the Rams defense is going to be really one of the top ones in the league. Over under 40,000 turning up for the game.
5:30 in San Francisco.
Yes.
No, half an hour out of San Francisco. My best mate lives south of San Francisco, and that stadium is not easy to get to. I think under 40,000.
Now let's talk about Sunday. This weekend kicks off the first of the international series. Baltimore Ravens and Jacksonville Jaguars will face each other at Wembley. Now, the Jaguars had a great first game against the Texans, but last week's game against Titans didn't quite go so well for them. How do you think they're going to fare against the Ravens this week?
Well, Saxonville only lasted 1 week. It's always hard to predict, especially teams coming over this early in the season when they've not found their groove. I think it makes it a bit more of a coin toss, but you've got to think with Jacksonville, unless they can establish the run early and protect Blake Bortles and not have him throw the ball really at all, then they're going to struggle. The Ravens' D has been brilliant through the first 2 games, and that, fair enough, they haven't played stellar offenses by any means, but the Jaguars aren't a stellar offense. So I think a lot of it comes down to, can the Jags establish the run game, start getting some motion? That might, if you force the Ravens to have to attack you, I think that's where you're in success, because I'm still not convinced, particularly mainly because of injuries, about the Ravens offense and how they'll do against a really good D. And then obviously the Jags on D are pretty good as well. Good young talent. They've proved themselves in week 1. I just find it so hard to call. I mean, I think I'd probably say the Ravens are the favourites for me slightly, but just given the situation, it's week 3, it's London. It's hard to see this being more than a coin toss.
I have to agree. What I have to say is it's a victory for Wembley to see 2 reasonably competitive teams turn up. They've been maligned for quite some time for sending their rubbish over to the UK for us. Though we enjoy it and are very grateful. But like you say, yeah, a battle of two very good defences. I think they're both going to play very well. The Jags, they're here every year, and they, even in their worst times, they've always shown something, except for that game against Oakland, perhaps. They've also always shown a bit of something. The Baltimore Ravens, they're one of my dark horse picks for the whole thing. Unless they can get Leonard Fournette going, I think it's Ravens all the way.
Yeah, I watched some of the Titans Jaguars game, and it was bad. Like both offenses couldn't really get going. I don't think it was great defense. It was just, and we'll probably get into it later, just conservative offense strategy. 3-yard passes, 5-yard passes. It's 3rd and 11. Here's a 7-yard check down. Just like really sort of miserable offense to watch. And the only thing that the Jags have got going for them is that Fournette is a real battering ram, and even really 3 yards, 4 yards, they're able to sort of take small chunks at a time. If they can really establish the run against the Ravens, then there may be some holes opening. But I don't know whether Bortles will be good enough to exploit that when if the Ravens start coming up to try and take down Fournette, which is it often takes 2 or 3 men to take him down. I saw some of the Ravens-Browns game as well, and there are holes in the Ravens' defense behind, especially when they play zone, behind the corners, and Weddle and who's the other, Jefferson. When they try and get over to cover, they're not quite fast enough to get there. There's holes. I think that when Kelly Hogan came to the game for the Browns, he was finding it sometimes, sort of like 15 yard, 20 yards down the field on the sides. There's space there behind the Ravens cornerbacks. Having said that, I'm not sure Bortles is in the form or has the ability to take advantage of that, especially with Allen Robinson out as well.
Oh, he won't be able to take advantage until the fourth quarter when they're 30 points behind.
Yes, Bortles time, Bortles fantasy time. But having said that, I've just got a sneaky feeling for the Jaguars, only because they know London. They've won twice in a row at Wembley. This is the first time they've come to Wembley with a 500 or better record, and they've done it in week 3. Amazing. But I've got a sneaky feeling for the Jaguars. They have the home advantage at Wembley. I think a lot of Jaguars fans and London fans generally back them. Yeah, I'm going Jags for that one.
Ooh, your passion may turn me around on this.
Yeah, Johnny. I'm not totally sold on the Ravens defense either.
No, I got
their front can get there. Suggs and Mosey, they can get to the quarterback and harry them. But I'm not totally sold on them. But whether the Jags can take advantage.
And they've not played a running game yet. The Bengals can't get it together. That's very true. So this will be really interesting.
It's a real test for them, yeah.
Duncan, you spoke with Jermaine Illumina today. He's the offensive lineman for Baltimore Ravens. How was that?
Yes, that was very interesting. There was quite a few of us on a conference call in between practices for the Ravens. Obviously over here for the game on Sunday, and what I took from that, he's had a very interesting history. It was 10 years ago, the first NFL game in London, the Dolphins versus the Giants. And he was there as a 12-year-old and decided that moment, that's the game for me. That's what I want to play. He went off and played flag football, and he was enjoying that. And then 2 years later, at the age of 14, he went to America with his family, and they went to some games. They went to see some college football, and he was so sort of enthralled by it that his dad said, "Look, do you want to move out here? This is your passion. We can move out here." And they had this fantastic opportunity, which I didn't gather details about, sort of the whys and wherefores of how they were able to move to America. But they did it. They went for it, and he played for high school, and he ended up playing at, forgive me for the pronunciation if this is wrong, Lackawanna Junior College. He played there for 3 years before he's noticed for his senior year, and he was asked to play for Ohio State, Florida State, and ended up choosing Texas A&M. So it's just a brilliant history of just how it can happen. It's a victory for his persistence and his passion. Really, it just demonstrates to any kids out there that it can be done. It was a really good story.
Sticking to Sky Sports coverage, the Sunday evening games kick off with Atlanta Falcons and Detroit Lions. Both teams looking great right now, but who comes out of the win?
Falcons. I think a lot of people were expecting them to have their Super Bowl hangover, which especially NFC teams really seem to struggle with Super Bowl hangovers over the last 15 years. But they haven't really missed a beat. I thought that they'd struggle a little bit with Kyle Shanahan leaving, but they haven't. The offense looks good, and it's great against the Packers. The defense looks like it's getting better than it was last year. It was pretty average last year. Secondary looked good. I know the Packers had a lot of some injuries that came up during the game as well. But the Falcons look really hot at the moment. The Lions look nice. They look good. I like Abdullah out the backfield now that he's fit again, and hopefully he can last the whole season. Nice sort of jinking runner. But yeah, I think the Falcons are going to take this. I think they're going to go 3-0.
Yeah, I possibly don't think too differently. It's been two relatively easy games for the Lions, but I would say is are they just warm-ups? They showed throughout last year that they've got a heck of a lot of spunk. They can, so many comeback wins. If they can keep this one close, like they have done in the past, anything's possible. That would be. I'm keen to see the Lions play, when the upper teams in the NFL and just see what they are actually all about this season.
Yeah, I agree. You don't want to get too carried away by the first 2 weeks because if you'd have asked me 3 weeks ago, I'd have said Atlanta win this. It's inside. They're going to be strong, good fast D. But I mean, I know it's early, but Detroit are impressing. They converting on 48% third downs. They're looking nice, and they're looking more varied. They're taking a bit of pressure off Stafford, and Stafford seems like he's making better decisions. That said, I think the talent on Atlanta is just better. I think they're only going to get stronger. That D is only going to get better. I think it's one of the exciting young Ds. And, this is the third in 3 weeks that they're playing the NFC North. Obviously played the Bears, played the Packers. Bit of a stumble outside on Soldier Field, but looked quite comfortable on Sunday in a good game. So, I think you've got to go with the Falcons here. But I think the Lions will put up more of a fight than perhaps we may have thought prior to the season.
And the next game that evening is going to be Kansas City Chiefs, LA Chargers. What are your thoughts on that? Any predictions?
Well, the Chiefs have just looked fantastic, haven't they? I mentioned last week the triplets. You've got Kelsey, you've got Hunt, and obviously Tyreek Hill. They're just looking so formidable. The defence is still looking strong. Houston is just back to his old self. You'd think the Chargers wouldn't have a chance, but they've stayed in touch in both games. They could have won it, but for that last kick, twice in a row. The first game was against Denver, and we also saw how good they looked against the Cowboys last week. So again, it's going to be one of those games where really anything can happen. I don't fancy my accumulator this week, I tell you that much.
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers haven't brought many fans from San Diego to LA, but they certainly have brought their ability to choke at the end of games. So I just think the Chiefs are going to have too much for them. I've got a feeling the Chargers are going to end up just being this big embarrassment for the NFL and for Goodell's later years of his time in office. I just can't see anything going right for the Chargers being in LA, especially when the Raiders are going to come up in a few weeks' time. That stadium is going to be 95% Raiders fans. I just think there's going to be this is going to roll on all year. They're in the toughest division in the league. They've got great offensive weapons. They've got Rivers is great, and Gordon, Gates is still doing it. But I just got a feeling this is going to be a bad year for the Chargers, and it's going to sort of like be a lingering problem for the NFL over these next 3 years. So I'm going to go Chiefs.
I think the Chargers are going to lose all 16 games in a heartbreaker. Most of them decided by missing a kick. I mean, they've brought that bad luck right with them up the coast to LA. And I feel for Phillip Rivers because he's a really good quarterback and he's actually a personality and he's got something about him. And I know he rubs people the wrong way because he complains about everything.
And he's got 20 kids as well.
Yeah. I mean,
it's very
can do it all. And I love Keenan Allen. You really want to see him do well. But the Chiefs are too strong, man. I mean, they've come right out of the gates. Who'd have thought that Spencer Ware getting injured was actually one of the best things that could happen? And you never want to say that, but giving Kareem Hunt this opportunity. 30 carries for 229 yards, as well as 8 receptions for 126 yards. He's got 5 TDs through 2 games. I mean, that's unreal. And like you say, the triplets he had in Kelsey and Hill with a really stout D. I sort of had the Chiefs and the Raiders at the top of the division. I thought the Chiefs might be the 5th seed, but play like this and they're in contention for a bye. And again, we're only 2 weeks in, but they overcame a good Eagles team last week, and that was a really interesting and fun game to watch. But I think the Chiefs take this, and I actually think they do it quite convincingly.
Quick diversion. Do you think Philip Rivers is Hall of Fame material?
I mean, it's rough, isn't it? Because you put him in his class with Manning and Roethlisberger, and it's kind of hard because they've both got a couple of rings. It's really difficult to justify when he hasn't. Statistically, he's great.
The reason I say that is because on Monday Night Football, Sean McDonough, the announcer, referred to Manning as a future Hall of Famer, and I thought, is he? Is he a future Hall of Famer? Like, statistically, no. Has he had that many good seasons or that many good periods where, like, he's got a great surname for Hall of Fame, and obviously he's got 2 rings written on the back of great defense, and he got hot at the right time. But I was surprised that they had this sort of 100% assumption that Eli Manning was his future, first ballot Hall of Fame thing.
But I think it's sort of the formula, isn't it? 2 rings, top 10 passing yards. He's going to go past Moon, probably going to go past Elway. I'd be surprised if he gets past Marino, because Marino's 6, he's like 12, 13,000 behind. But he's going to end up, the 6th overall passing yards, And Rivers isn't that far behind, and Rivers is going to end up top 10. But when you've got Manning and Roethlisberger both above you, and they've got the rings, it's kind of hard to justify to put Rivers in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's a shame, because he's played on much worse teams than Manning and Roethlisberger have ever had. But it's just hard to justify for me. I think he'll just miss out. He'll be maybe in like 20 years, he'll get one of those sort of senior nods.
Yeah.
But I don't see him going in early.
Yeah, you're right. It's just such a rough last 7 years of his career. If you'd asked that question in 2008, pretty much say it was nailed on. But the back 9 of his career is the talent around him has just not been anywhere near enough to sort of keep him in contention and sort of in the spotlight. So it's a shame.
But, and there was a good point, about this season, saying that the Chargers are going to go 0-16 with a point differential of -16. That's just what's going to happen to him, and that's Rivers' career in a nutshell, in a way.
Yeah.
And the final Sunday night game is Oakland Raiders at Washington Redskins. Again, how do you see that game going? Gareth, I know that you're a Washington fan, and why don't you start us off?
The Raiders are going to beat us, but of course I'm going to, back Washington in my picks, because it's blind loyalty, isn't it? I really don't know what to make of Washington through 2 weeks. We had a great game on the ground against a run defense that wasn't up to par against the Rams, but the first week we looked shambolic against the Eagles, who took advantage of us. The whole Sua Cravens thing is just unsavoury, particularly how it's happened this week. And I think Oakland are too good. I'd like to say it's close. I'd like to say that Washington sort of start getting a rhythm, but I think with the big stage, Sunday Night Football, I think the Raiders put on a show and bring themselves further into national attention as real contenders.
Yeah, it's got to be the Raiders again for me. Just purely the weapons they have, and I mean, I'm sorry, Gareth, but I'm kind of concerned for the Redskins this year. Earlier, a few months ago, they lost their general manager, who, unusual circumstances, but I really rate the guy as one of the best back office people in the league.
Yeah, terrible decision.
Yeah, and he's brought through talent such as Earl Thomas, Navarro Bowman, Patrick Willis, who was involved with Frank Gore. You can go even further back than that. I thought while he was still there, this was going to be your year, that he's maybe brought in some talent, similarly to how he has in the past. He was really raving about Matt Jones, and he's gone. Sua Cravens was one of his picks, and he's going somewhere, I'm sure. But it's really all fallen apart, hasn't it? It's maybe some things going on there. His Cousins, I think, he's still playing year by year for the Redskins. There might be some rebuilding to go on there, unfortunately.
Definitely. Yeah, Super Bowl 18 rematch. I do like my Super Bowl rematches, especially the early 80s ones. So it's going to look good under the lights. I've not really seen enough of Washington to be able to make an opinion on them. I did see all the Raiders-Jets game on Sunday, and I'm still not massively sold on the Raiders. They've got great skill position players on offense, and one or two on defense as well. Although Khalil Mack was very quiet against Shell, the right tackle for the Jets, who is actually the nephew of, or great nephew of, the Raiders legend Art Shell. And the Jets were in that game until right before the end of the first half, when they muffed a punt. And the Jets have got the worst inside linebacker core in the league, with Darren Lee and DeMaurice Davis. Not wishing to dive the Jets moan, but so it wasn't the hardest game for the Raiders on the ground. I think the Raiders probably will win this, but I don't really know enough about the Redskins to sort of have a confident guess at this. But I'm interested to see how the Raiders deal with being in that division where the Broncos and the Chiefs, well, because the Raiders to me are quite a streaky team, even during games. So probably Raiders, but
Well, if this is symmetry for the history, then referring back to Super Bowl 18, I just had a quick look, and the Redskins
38-9.
38-9, but the Redskins were favoured by 3. Now, if you look at the lines,
yes,
Oakland are favoured by 3 on Sunday night. So maybe I look in a 38-9 win for Washington.
Well, the Redskins were Super Bowl champions going to that game, and I think they had beaten the Raiders during the season as well. And even just before half time, they threw like a screen pass, like Theismann too. I can't remember who the running back was for the Redskins at the time, and and the Raiders remembered that. So the Redskins had the ball at the end of the first quarter on their own 5-yard line, and the thought was they just run out of play, run timeout. But the Raiders were alive to it, and they had Jack Squirac sit on the screen, and that's what that famous interception almost on the goal line that put the Raiders up 2 or 3 touchdowns, I think, at the half. That came into effect. Yeah, but John Riggins had flu as well in that Super Bowl. It was just a bad day all around for the Redskins.
I like to think I have a good memory, John, but that's ridiculous what you've just reeled off.
Yeah, I'm not typing anything. That is me just staring at a plant in the lounge.
That's redonkulous.
And then Monday Night Football sees Dallas Cowboys travel to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. How do you think this game's going to end? Duncan, I know you recently wrote an article on the blog about this. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that and then give us your thoughts on the game?
Yes. Again, I feel privileged. This time I was able to speak to Tyrann Mathieu. And
we get name dropping all over the shop, eh?
I know.
Name drop bombs. Here we are. I was speaking to Jermaine. I've been speaking
to sorry,
yeah.
So me and my pal the Honey Badger. So we started off having a bit of a joke about Josh Mauro and how he's going to be the next London's Jay Ajayi and be St Albans Josh Mauro, and really take the place of Calais Campbell on the defence. Kondiche looked like he's coming through in pre-season, but I've seen Mauro playing the first 2 games, and he's really looking like coming through. Tyrann Mathieu was keen, said he's looking for more first team reps, and who's going to be a good player, and it's really starting to show. So hopefully he'll put St Albans on the map. But not least, we're talking about Carson Palmer, Larry Fitzgerald. They're always flirting with retirement. They're back this season again, and also Bruce Arians, his health. And I'm sort of speculating about whether this might be their last season. And the indication I got from Tyron Matthew was that this might be. He didn't say that in so many words, but he did point out that the whole team has really wanted to fight for them and get them a ring, and to quote him, see them ride off happily into the sunset. So this is obviously on the players' minds, and that their teammates, they talk. So if I could read into it, I think this might be the last season for Palmer and Fitzgerald together at the club, and I really worry for the Cardinals that they might be mid-reboot. But yes, as for this game, the Cowboys really feel they'll need to show something after last week. Ezekiel Elliott, particularly, Dak Prescott needs to show probably some more leadership. Jason Witten, and they'll with so much to prove, and against, like I say, an aging Cardinals team who really haven't lived up to potential. I think this could be somewhat of a bloodbath.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching the Cowboys going further and further behind the Broncos last week. It was a real sort of chance to go on then, Dak Prescott. Let's see what you've got. You had a season where Elliott was carrying a lot of the load with the offensive line, and the defense was doing pretty well, and they were always in games, always within a score, if not normally sort of leading from the front. And so suddenly they were down 3 or 4 touchdowns, and it was like, right, now you've got a pass, nothing else is working. Sort of, what have you got? And he didn't have that much success with it. Broncos defense was fantastic, but I was a bit disappointed by what Prescott could do. And Bryant was pretty much covered for most of the game. I still think that they're going to have too much for the Cardinals, though, because the Cardinals feel a bit like 2 seasons ago was like that was their moment. That was their moment in the sun. That was the time to do it. Everyone fell in love with them when they watched the Amazon Prime series that followed it, and everyone was tipping them last year. They're going to go to the Super Bowl, and it just did not happen. And then with the David Johnson injury this season as well, you just sort of feel like this is sort of like the end of this sort of mini Cardinals era they had, and as you say, sort of Fitzgerald and Palmer coming to the end. I don't know. I don't have good feelings for the Cardinals this year. I'm going to go with the Cowboys, even if Elliott's suspended by the time Monday rolls around. I'll go Cowboys for this one.
Yeah, so I'm a big Bruce Arians fan, both from All or Nothing, but also from his A Football Life. I mean, he's just a character. He loves the game. He's straightforward. He's got lovely gimmicks and sound bites. That's great. But it does feel like maybe it's one season too far for Palmer. Fitz still looks great. Fitz is a legend, but the Johnson injury really hurts him. Now, just to counteract that, I think that the thing about Palmer through 2 weeks being done is a bit overblown. He's completing just shy of 55% of his passes, 7.1 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Palmer's always thrown interceptions. He's going to throw interceptions. But if they can get into a groove, JJ Nelson's had a good start, a couple of big catches. He's proven he can still throw the deep ball, but they need to find balance with the running game. And, CJ2K is there. Who knows if he's going to be any good. He didn't look great. The O-line is a bit of a concern, but I think there's promise there if they can get into a groove, because the D, I think, could overperform. Honey Badger, Patrick Peterson, both brilliant players. If Kondiche can, press on a little bit, they've got players there. The 2 rookies, Reddick and Buda Baker, both got bags of potential first 2-round picks. And Dallas, because they're in my division and they're Dallas, I always think less of, even though I try to be as impartial as possible. But I think, Jono, you're exactly right with, you saw what Prescott, when he had to try and drive it forward, when it was on his arm, didn't quite have perhaps that array that people thought. Perhaps he's better in that terrible game manager role, which doesn't mean anything, but you know what I mean by that, that you've got a good running game, good O-line, and perhaps there's been too much change in Dallas. They've lost players on the O-line. You can't just replace them. With Elliott potentially out, can Prescott carry the load? Because that D, again, has lost talent. I'm always amazed how Marinelli gets more out of the sum of the parts of the Dallas D, because it always looks on paper threadbare. So, again, I find this one difficult to call. It's indoors, so, the weather element's not in there. I really want to see the Cardinals pick up the win and maybe just alleviate a bit of pressure, because I think that's what they're feeling at the moment. So I'm going to take the Cardinals, but probably through faith and wishing more than objective analysis.
Moving away from game predictions and whatnot, let's talk about the offensive line. It's clearly bringing up some issues for many teams at the moment. Jono, sorry if I'm throwing you under the bus, but would you like to start us off?
I'm going to pass on to Duncan. I'm going to do a read option and decide, Duncan's actually going to have better success taking the ball here. I've got some thoughts, but it sort of moves away from the offensive line, and Duncan's more of an offensive line expert. So I'll let him speak first, and I'll chip in afterwards.
Well, first of all, checks in the post, expert. It's been a funny old year. You've got the Seahawks, who traditionally, don't have an O-line. The Giants are looking weak. Several other teams as well just don't seem to be able to pull it together. I don't know whether they're trying to sort of follow the Seahawks model and spend less on the O-line, concentrating on those skill positions and hoping to develop some big, cheap athletes with coaching. But whatever they're doing, it's not working. Obviously, to counter that, there's some teams like teams that spent money like Oakland, Tennessee, the Cowboys, who have great offensive lines, and that really shows as well, because they're able to push their other offensive players further than they possibly could go, just with great protection. And New England have done wonders with sort of third, fourth round picks, Shaq Mason, Cannon, I forget who their centre is, but just some real lesser players. And Dante Scarnecchia is their offensive line coach, has just done a fantastic job in New England. As for what's going wrong, I believe it's that there's so many factors, but the play is just sort of diabolical. If you're on Twitter, a great follow is Brian Baldinger, and he will analyse the play and drop 30-second videos and point out exactly where and when the plays broke down. It's fascinating to watch. But also, again, on Twitter, there's a former coach and scout of very highly thought of guy in the world of O-line play, Charles Bentley, who was on the first game of the season, he was sort of going quite crazy about the play and claiming that he would be able to find 5 free agents who were better than some of these teams are putting out right now. So it's interesting that people like that think that these teams are doing things so wrongly. But they seem quite stubborn to make changes. For example, the Seahawks, again, who have had Tom Cable in their O-line coach for about 5 or so years. And he's really not being very successful, yet he gets called one of the best assistant coaches in the league. And just when you throw the whole thing together, it's really quite puzzling, but also very interesting to look into. I'm sure they'll bring it together like they always do, but they're really struggling at the moment. It's making for some quite poor offensive play overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think before Jono comes back with his points that he's going to drop on us.
They're not that good. Yeah. Don't hold on for that.
Not to make a weird analogy, but I'm going to. It's like people complaining about universities closing modern language departments, or there aren't enough, female students in engineering or good students in engineering, and blaming universities for that when schools don't offer modern languages anymore because the budgets are getting cut and nobody does it from an early age. It's like saying that the O-line in the NFL play is bad and that's the NFL's fault. I mean, partly because of the CBA, but they play a different game in college fundamentally, particularly in the trenches and particularly on O-line, because they are not asked to do the things that they're going to be asked to do in the pro games. So there's no setup for that, and that, I think, is just been exacerbated year on year over the last, probably since, particularly since the new CBA, because perhaps in the past having more time to train out bad habits, teach out bad habits, and inculcate good practice through two-a-days and through more padded sessions has helped guys really get up to speed quicker. But now, the phrase that, September is just part of the off-season for a lot of teams is probably the case when you have rookie O-lines that guys on the O-line that have not, been in a 3-point stance, haven't been asked to execute the range of plays, haven't had to stand in the huddle and understand what's going to be called and be able to react to it. And, it's a great thing because it's not a glamorous position. It's seen as a bit nerdy as well if you're really into O-line play, but it's fundamental because the game looks so poor when the O-line is crumbling around. It really detracts from the quality of the spectacle that you're watching. And I think it's something that really needs to be remedied. I know, the next point we'll talk about around the CBA, but they need to do something because it's almost like the teams can't coach up the talent big enough. And maybe it'll have a knock on. Maybe you'll start seeing O-line guys that play in pro schemes at smaller schools that weren't 5-star recruits start getting drafted higher because they have the fundamentals rather than the athleticism. They have the fundamentals of understanding pro schemes, and so perhaps will adjust quicker. I don't know, but it is a real issue, I think, and we're just seeing it so exacerbated by teams, particularly such as the Seahawks.
I think a lot of people concentrate on the pass blocking, but I really miss good offensive run blocking. Sort of clearing real paths that running backs run through. You can just sort of count on one hand the decent run blocking lines in the league, and it was great to see the Broncos, actually making some great holes for CJ Anderson on Sunday. It was just it's so great to see a running game working well. I sort of think that and for me, a lot of these problems sort of start with that and with the NFL. Their obsession, their sort of marketing obsession with making getting as many teams to score as many points as possible, or making passing yards increase, and making the quarterback like the central figure and like the most important person on the field, more important than it's ever been in history. And the knock on for every action's got a reaction. I never feel like the NFL or Goodell really sort of understand this, and there's so many different examples of this. But like, bad offensive line for me stems from making the game all about passing and quarterbacks and receivers. And when you do that, so the quarterback's the most important position. But then what's the next most important thing that a team needs to do is to get after the quarterback. So then for kids, you're either going to be cornerbacks or you're going to be defensive linemen. All the best athletes, I get paid if I'm on defensive line. Don't get paid if I'm a right tackle or a left guard. So suddenly you get all the good kids, all like the best athletes in high school and college. If you're not going to be a quarterback, you're better off being. Then the next best choice is to be defensive line, and suddenly then you're getting a real sort of divide in athleticism and ability, just natural ability between those two sets of players, and then you've got such much more athletic and fast defensive line going up against offensive players, plus a conservative and really risk-averse offensive strategy that we're going through at the moment. So you end up getting these 5-yard, 2-yard dink and dunk offenses because they don't want the quarterback to hold the ball longer than two seconds.
Yeah,
and for some reason, interceptions are seen as the worst thing a quarterback can do. It's much better to throw for 150 yards and no interceptions than to throw for 250 yards and one interception. And I just think it sort of snowballed from that. The NFL wanting to just expand the passing game, expand the importance of the quarterback, almost convert it into an individual sport with some supporting actors on the side. And this has led to sort of to a position where you're getting offensive talent, athletic talent that just can't stack up against the second most important position, which is for Miller, Khalil Mack, just trying to get after the quarterback. So, it's not going to be fixed.
The Seahawks are such a fine example of everything you've mentioned on Sunday. That they're playing the 49ers, who, I apologise, they don't have a great offense. Defense. It's good. It's very good. Got some good players, good first-round picks on the D-line. But, Russell Wilson now looks scared. He now looks like he's got the yips. And he's throwing these 3-yard passes because they need to get the ball out of his hands before the defensive line are on top of him. And the running game also, they were a zone blocking running team when Russell Wilson was in his second year, won the Super Bowl. they wanted to minimise the mistakes, the chances of mistakes. They had Marshall Lynch. They wanted to run the ball, pound the rock, they say. And Chris Carson, the new rookie running back, he looked good. He had some big breakaways, which he looked good. Don't get me wrong, but they may have inflated his stats slightly because on the face of it, he was an expert at getting back to the line of scrimmage, and that's where he was tackled. Like you say, just the dink and dunk, the minimising the risk, it's really prominent this year.
And it's really dull to watch. I find myself enjoying the game a lot less than I almost ever have. This crippling conservative approach to the games, and just watching Bortles play, or Kaiser for the Browns, or McCown for the Jets. I know they're not great quarterbacks, but they're just not even given a chance to complete a pass 15, 20 yards down the field. It's just don't turn the ball over. Don't turn the ball over is the number one priority when these players are on the field. And I don't know. It was like 2010, 2011. That's when sort of like the whole passing thing really exploded. And like the passing stats got up exponentially from there for like the last 7 or 8 years. I don't think it's improved the game at all. We've seen rushing attempts decrease every year, but a great rushing game is brilliant to watch. I think a 10-yard run is more aesthetically pleasing to watch than a 10-yard slant. But for some reason, we've got ourselves into this, like, we must appeal to casual fans and fantasy fans. Let's change the rules. Let's make defense almost impossible to play. That's another problem. It is almost impossible to defend a 4-yard slant thrown to Beckham. You know it's going to come, but you can't do anything about it because of the rules. Therefore, offensive coaches are like, brilliant, we'll just take that. That's what we'll do. Let's not risk 15-yard outs down the field. Let's all the short stuff, because the defenses can't really stop that at all. And it's much easier to do that than it is to try and craft a running game and get 10 yards. And it is a pistol or a shotgun offense, just quick strike, one step, quick strike.
And then finally, it was announced today that DeMaurice Smith, he was basically re-elected as the head of the NFL Players Union. The vote was unanimous, but there seems to have been some kind of dislike with that vote, with people saying that it was a non-democratic process. What are your thoughts on this? Do we think that he was right to be re-elected? Should there be a bit more of a competition?
So it gets into the wonderful world of committee structures and trade union bylaws and constitutions. But essentially, there's an executive committee of the union, which is, players, and they're elected to that committee. For DeMaurice Smith to be re-elected, it needed to be unanimous that the committee wanted him to get a new contract, which it was. If it hadn't have been, it would have then gone to the wider representatives of each club, of each franchise, for which other people could have stood for consideration. But because the committee of elected representatives decided to unanimously recommend he was given a new contract, he was. So, and the complaint is it shouldn't be, the committee shouldn't have the structure to do that. And indeed, that is a recent change in the constitution of the Players' Union. That said, the really important thing about this re-election is he's going to be in charge for the new CBA coming, and negotiations will start in a couple of years, and it's going to be for 2021. DeMaurice Smith already said, a while ago that there will be a lockout. He can't see any other way. And you have this real, absolute sort of dilemma when it comes to the renegotiation of the CBA, because we've just talked about, the CBA inhibiting offensive line play, coaching, the ability of coaches to actually get the players up to speed, to improve the product, to improve the quality. But on the other side, you have still the massive issue and the primary issue of player safety. And they're almost irreconcilable. And that's really going to be difficult because, there is a perception perhaps of an overly friendly relationship between DeMaurice Smith and Roger Goodell. And, there's been some, word that Roger Goodell's probably the happiest about this extension. So, I think it spells trouble for what's ahead. I don't think it means too much now. But yeah, and until we start getting to the earliest parts of negotiation about what's going to be on the table in the new CBA and what's not, we won't really know. So at the moment, I think people are pissed off procedurally, but in a few years, fans are going to be pissed off when the potential of games being lost to a strike, for the first time in what will be by then 30 odd years.
Okay, well, that's all for this week's podcast. Thanks to everyone who tuned in, and a huge thank you to Jono, Duncan and Gareth for joining me. I'm off to go back to the pool now, so thanks for listening.